We're Phoenix Equity Partners. We're a UK mid-market private equity investor. I'm a partner in the firm and also the Chief Financial Officer, Chief Risk Officer, and a few other things that I don't put on my business card. I think we've been working actively for 4 years, but I've known Bruce for much longer. But we were active clients for between 4 and 5 years. Uh, for us. They're a firm that when we found them, we didn't know we were looking for them, but when we found them, we were very glad that we had found them. We work in an area, but we're sort of small to mid-sized businesses. We write checks between 20 and 50 million pounds. So we buy businesses that are typically valued between 100 and 200 million pounds. And those are sort of small but growing fast businesses, but they don't have massive teams. So most often in our businesses, it's the CFO or COO potentially that's responsible for insurance. But they're a bit like me. We're a 30-person team. A bit like me, they've got lots of other responsibilities, and they're not insurance experts. And the one thing that became very, very clear to me through my career is that insurance is a very, very complicated world, full of very, very technical factors, which you kind of can't guess. And I have had experience of claims on insurance situations where they haven't gone terribly well. That ultimately, you almost had to get lawyers involved to get the insurance company to come to the party. And in all cases, they eventually did. But the protracted and rather difficult nature of that process taught me that sometimes you need help, and you also need to really clearly understand the legal and commercial dynamics of the insurance industry. And so when we came across Mactavish, that basically bridges that gap between making sure that your broker is, because the problem with brokers is the clues in the name. They are broking two parties, so they've got to have sort of willing buyer, willing seller, or willing seller, willing buyer, whichever way you look at it. And you, as the client, are in the middle. And what we use Mactavish for is to make sure that the product we're being sold is the product we think we're buying. And you could say they're keeping the insurers honest. I'm not saying they're dishonest. It's just making sure that we, as the client, are being best served by both parties in that transaction. I think they are very, very open and very skilled and understand in great depth the process, legal requirements, and obligations on both parties. That is a fundamental part of brokering a proper and robust insurance contract, because that's what a policy is. Bruce uses a phrase which I really love, which is, if you're using insurance as part of your risk management process, you better make sure that insurance is A, what you're expecting it to be, and B, if the bad thing happens, you'll be appropriately compensated for it. And so it's fantastic they're a great comfort in buying insurance. They have helped us understand the changes in the laws in relation to the duty of disclosure, and making sure that we do our part, because I think there's nothing worse in a situation where it all goes terribly wrong and you claim on the insurance. And it turns out it's not the insurer's fault, it's actually your own fault. You didn't disclose appropriately, you didn't apply the necessary rigour to the insurer. Too many contracts over the years, I am sure, and I've done it, and I know other CFOs have done it. Is if it's not that much more expensive than last year, and the wording looks broadly similar, you can't sign on the dotted line, move on, wait till next year. In practice, that is not the way to go about renewing and placing insurance. I think the most important thing is that they make sure that we understand the risk within our businesses, and I think that they've done some fantastic work within our portfolio of actually sitting down to the point and say, what do you think your risks are, and being able then to point out, well, actually you might want to think about this because that feels like a risk to me. So they've done a great job of doing that. They've done a great job of, as I say, this duty of disclosure, understanding what our side of the bargain needs to be with the insurance. There's no use suddenly finding out you had a problem and saying, "Oh, we told you that." No, you didn't. So they're very, very good at making sure that the quality of our disclosure and therefore the quality of our submissions are consistent with the law and up to scratch. and then they negotiate. They negotiate well. The other thing is, they understand the wordings. They've got very, very smart people who are experts in this area. As I say, we can't be experts in this area. If I was an expert in this area, I should be working solely in the insurance industry, and I'm not. So they're great at bringing expertise to bear on making sure it all joins up. Back to Bruce's, if you're relying on it, make sure it's reliable. The funny thing for me, or the rewarding thing for me, to a certain degree pioneered introducing Bruce to our business. I have a lot of the decision-making capabilities over that particular one, so that was straightforward. But using Bruce across the portfolio, we are investors in companies. We don't. We may be sometimes we're the largest shareholder, but we don't run the companies. The board run the companies. The CEOs are in charge of those companies. So we need to persuade those individuals that this is a company that is worth interacting with. And every single business that we have introduced Mactavish to have subsequently taken on Mactavish longer term and have become sort of trusted advisors. So I think for me that's by far the most rewarding bit for me is spotting a really important risk management advisor and then being able to convince other people actually what they're worth doing business with. I think one of the whenever you've got the word risk in your role, I remember there's an IT director I once heard that said the problem with IT is the best result you'll ever get is a 0-0 draw. The same applies to risk. I mean, no one ever sort of pats you on the back and says, well done for the world not ending yesterday. But if the world sort of does end, everyone looks at you. And I think, again, all we ever want to do as professionals is to do a professional job. And I think the moment I realised that this area of insurance for which I am responsible and for which my colleagues in portfolio companies, CFOs, COOs are also responsible, I simply don't have the tools to do it properly. I mean, I can't really look myself in the mirror and say I can do a world-class job at that. And I like to think I can do a good job at most of the things I'm responsible for. The second I had that realisation, I knew I needed to get somebody who could provide that level of risk assurance to me personally, as I sleep at night. And that's what they have done. They've introduced a professional framework that we can apply to that critical part of our risk management. Now, I'm a big fan of trying to join dots up in processes, and so we have now working with them. They do. I mean, because the greatest way to understand the risk of a portfolio company, or potentially of a potential portfolio company that perhaps shouldn't be a portfolio company, is to get in there before you've signed the check. And so they do risk review, and when we do follow through in a transaction, that then puts them in an absolutely sort of position A to then follow through with structure and a plan and a way of making sure that during our ownership we have the best possible risk profile. They're great to work with. I think they are they're intellectually curious, stimulating. They will have absolutely no fear in challenging. I'm quite happy making fairly strong, sweeping statements. They'll come back to me and say, "Oh no, actually, I don't think you're right," and that's great. I mean, that's fundamental. So I think the most important thing about a provider, particularly one in this of this nature, is that to the extent that they see inertia, they seek to change that, and they're great sort of catalysts for change. I would, and I regularly do. I think they are, to some degree, not sure whether I should say this, but to some degree, you don't want too many people to know about them. I'm sure that the business themselves would argue with that perspective. But no, I think I think if you really understand risk and you really understand that fundamentally a skill in risk management is always think the unthinkable, and if you think the unthinkable and apply your risk framework to that, and it doesn't look very good, then you need to think again. And that is the reason why I think you need somebody to help you in this area, and they do it fantastically well.